Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Straw Hat DXD by M1LoXD. In the battle against Kaido, Luffy falls of the island of Onigashima, and he is accidentally transported to another world. How will he find his way back? Huge shout-out to all the warlords of this channel. Want to stand among legends? Join the channel membership and show your support. Adios!
A few days after the events that had transpired, Luffy was sitting on top of the roof once more thinking about his crew and wondered what they would be doing right now. A few minutes had passed and the girls who were looking for him found him looking at the sky and the wind blew on him, making him look like some kind of deity. They walked up to him and greeted him, and he greeted them back with his casual smile, making the girls blush a bit. "Hey guys, what's up?" asked Luffy. "Oh, it's just that you've been gone for a while and we kinda got worried," said Asia in a shy tone. "Why are you sitting here all by yourself?" asked Rainier. "I was just admiring the sky," Luffy responded. "Mind if we join you?" asked Rias. "Sure," responded Luffy. They all sat around him with Kaneko sitting on his lap, and Luffy didn't mind since her small figure reminded him of Tama. But this just made all the girls mad since Kaneko was going to step ahead of them, but they let it slide for now at least. They all looked at Luffy, who looked at the sky and had a smile on his face as if he had some nostalgia, and the girls decided to ask him why he was smiling. "Hey Luffy," Akaino called him. Luffy asked as he looked at her. "Why are you smiling like that?" Akaino asked again. "Oh, I was just remembering my crew and the adventures we had," responded Luffy. They all looked at him a bit sad because sooner or later he was gonna leave to be with his friends again, but then they didn't fully believe Luffy was in fact a pirate except Asia and Rainier. They just couldn't wrap the concept of pirates in their head, and another thing was that Luffy didn't look or act like a pirate as strong as he was. He just didn't fit the part, in their head at least. "How is your crew like?" asked Kaneko. "They're awesome. Without them I would have died a long time ago," he said with a smile. "You really trust your crew, huh?" asked Rias with a smile. "Yeah, without them I can't do anything. It's a miracle that I even made it out of my home village by myself," said Luffy with a grin. "Can you tell us about them?" asked Tiamat. "Sure," said Luffy with a happy smile. They all looked at him with a smile and just wondered why such a kind soul wanted to a pirate as he started to talk about his crew. "First I have Zoro, he's my swordsman and the first to join my crew," he said with a look of nostalgia. "Wow, so he's your vice captain?" asked Graphia. "I mean, you can say that, I guess," he said, a bit confused. "Is he strong?" asked Rias. "Yeah, he's super strong," said Luffy. "How strong?" they all asked. "This one time back in Dressrosa he cut a giant in half with just on slash," said Luffy with a proud face. "Whoa," they said in amazement. "Then we have Usopp, he's my sniper," Luffy went on. They looked at him as was talking about his friends and they couldn't help but smile and listen. "He's great. He always hits his target no matter how far they are," Luffy said with a chuckle. "He sounds handy," commented Rias with a chuckle as Luffy went on. "Then there's Nami, my navigator," said Luffy, but then the girls instantly had looks of concern when they heard a girl's name coming from Luffy's mouth, and they immediately jumped him with questions. "Are you in any relationship with this Nami girl?" asked Rias. "Relationship?" Luffy looked at her confused. They all had a drop-off sweat on their foreheads because of Luffy's density. "How do you feel when you're around her?" asked Rainier. "I feel fine, I guess," Luffy responded. They all felt a bit better hearing that he has no feelings towards her, at least they hoped. Luffy looked at them with a confused face and then he continued talking about his friends. "Where was I? Ah yeah, I have Sanji. He's my cook, he makes the best food in all the sea," Luffy said while rubbing his stomach. "He's always thinking about food," they all thought to themselves. "Then I have Robin, she's my archaeologist," said Luffy as he trying to remember what an archaeologist does. But then again the girls were filled with questions about who Robin was. "Are you interested in her?" asked Graphia. "I guess she is interesting," said Luffy while rubbing his chin because he still can't remember what an archaeologist does. They just let it go again because he doesn't get what they mean, and Luffy gave up trying to remember what an archaeologist is, so he just decided to move on. I also have Chopper, he's my doctor, but he's also a reindeer, he said again. They really surprised the girls because Luffy had an animal as his crew's doctor, but they decided to ask questions another time and let him finish. Then I have Frankie, he's my shipwright and he's also a cyborg, said Luffy with a little bit of excitement. The girls smiled at Luffy's gullible personality and overall carefree self as he told them about his crew. Then there's my skeleton musician Brooke, he said as he remembered the day he met Brooke. They girls again looked at him with an astonished look because Luffy had weird beings in his crew, whether it was true or not, and all they could do was sit there and listen to him speak. And then finally I have Jimbei, he's my helmsman and he's also a fishman and the newest member of my crew, he said again with excitement. They all looked at him with confused faces and asked a question. What's a fishman? They all asked in unison. You guys don't know what are fishmen? Luffy asked in shock. No we don't, Akaino responded. A fishman is like a man and a fish in one or something like that, Luffy said as he couldn't properly describe what they were. They all had a surprised look on their faces because Luffy's world is full of weird and unknown beings and he just took them as normal things. You only have 10 people in your crew? Asked Rias. Yeah, Luffy said with a smile, isn't that too small? Akaino commented. Yeah, I thought pirates had hundreds of people in their crew, Tiamat added. I have a fleet but they basically forced themselves to work under me, he said a little annoyed. How many people does it have? Asked Graphia. Around 5,000, said Luffy without much of an expression. 5,000. They all screamed in surprise. You have that many people in your fleet, Graphia said in shock. I guess, he said as he was confused on their reaction. I wouldn't expect anything less from my Luffy-sama, said Rainier as she crossed her arms with a nervous smile and a sweat on her forehead. Exactly, said Tiamat with same expression as Rainier. Luffy didn't get what the fuss was about and decided to brush it off and look at the sky and spoke. Maybe one day you guys will meet them, he said with a smile. They all looked at him and smiled. Yeah, we hope so, they said in unison. They sat there for a while as they looked at the red sky and finally they left to their rooms so they can prepare to go back home the next day, but the girls had other ideas that night. As the day was about to end and everyone was heading to bed, we see a tired Naruto and a sweating Kiba. Well done, you guys did well today, said Sirzex. Yeah, said Naruto as he tried to catch his breath. Well, since you guys are leaving tomorrow, today's your last day under my training, Sirzex said a smile. They both got up and thanked Sirzex for his help. Thanks for everything, Naruto said with a little grunt. Thank you very much, said Kiba with a slight bow. No worries, said Sirzex with a chuckle. I'm a lot stronger now too, said Naruto with a cocky smile. Me too, said Kiba. That's good, said Sirzex as they were about to leave. Sirzex stopped them. Now don't forget to do those training exercises, Sirzex reminded them. We won't, Naruto assured him. Yeah, soon we'll get even stronger, said Kiba. Then we'll finally be able to beat that rubber idiot and all the ladies will come running to me, Naruto declared. Sirzex chuckled at that and let them go and rest for their departure the next day. This world has gotten a lot more interesting, he said with a smile. The next morning Sirzex walks in to wake up Luffy and sees that he's surrounded by several women on his bed. He gave a slight chuckle and decided to let them sleep a little longer and went back to Naruto and Kiba, who were sitting in the living room. Hey, where is everyone? Asked Issei. Oh, they're busy at the moment, responded Sirzex. Okay, then where's Luffy-san? Asked Kiba. Oh, he's sleeping, Sirzex said with a smile. Then I'll go wake him up, Naruto shouted as he ran to Luffy's room with the intent to give him a bad morning. Wait, Naruto, I don't think that's a good idea, Sirzex called out. But it was too late. Naruto had already went past the door and was heading straight for Luffy's room. A few seconds later Naruto arrived at Luffy's door and prepared to make the loudest noise he can. Alright, 3, 2, 1, Naruto burst the door open and as he was about to shout he saw several women on Luffy's bed and all of a sudden he lost all will to do anything. As he slowly walked back to where Kiba and Naruto were. A few hours later everyone was finally awake and prepared to go back to the human world. As they were about to leave, Graphia made the announcement that she would like to serve Luffy as his maid and come with him to the overworld. They were all shocked at the announcement, and after a few small arguments and fights it was decided that she can come with Luffy and serve as his maid. On their way back, Luffy noticed that Naruto was looking depressed and walked up to ask what's wrong. "Hey, you okay, Issei?" asked Luffy. Naruto looked at Luffy and comically cried as Luffy got even more worried about his friend. Guys, what's wrong with Issei?" Luffy asked everyone, who was just as confused as him. But Kiba chuckled because he knows what's wrong with Naruto and reassured them that is fine. After a few minutes, Naruto got up and pointed at Luffy. "One day," said Issei. "Huh?" asked Luffy, confused. "One day I will get stronger, then I'll be the harem king," Naruto announced. "What's a harem? Is it some kind of meat?" Luffy asked with a confused face. The girls giggled at Luffy's question and Naruto just had a sweat on his forehead. The trip back home went on and Luffy was busy asking the girls what a harem is, and they didn't want to tell him as to not dent his innocence and threatened Naruto not to tell or they would cut off his family jewels. After some time they finally got home and the sun was setting, so it was getting dark. "That was a long trip," said Luffy with a yawn. "Yeah, we got here pretty late," Akainu said with a smile. "Alright everyone, it's time to head home, we have to go back to school tomorrow," Rias announced. "Do I have to go back to that place?" said Luffy as he folded his hands and had a grumpy look. "Yes, now before I forget, Luffy." Rias looked at Luffy and smiled. "Huh?" Luffy looked back at her. "From today on we shall be living in your house since we are engaged," said Rias with a smile. "Sure," Luffy said with a smile. "More people," Rainier shouted in annoyance. I get to live in the same house as my darling Luffy," Akainu said with a blush and her hand on her cheek. "What do you mean your darling Luffy?" Tiamat retorted. "If anything, he's as good as mine," Rainier clapped back. "Can you please stop fighting?" Asia pleaded. "Luffy senpai is already mine," Kaneko said quietly as she stood next to the confused Luffy. "You girls seem to be forgetting something," Rias said with a grin. "And what's that?" they said in unison. "Luffy is my fiancé," Rias said proudly as she puffed out her chest. The girls just looked at her with anger and a fight broke out. "Why are they fighting?" Luffy asked Kiba, who just looked with a nervous smile. "You'll find out," Kiba answered. Naruto couldn't handle it and decided to go home and do the training Searsex told him to do. A few minutes had passed and the girls stopped fighting and agreed that it's up to Luffy to decide who his main wife will be. That night Luffy was waiting for his food to come, and since they weren't that many maids in the house, all the girls except Kaneko went to go cook food. An hour later the girls and a few maids came out with an extreme amount of food. Luffy started munching the food like there's no tomorrow, and the girls sat there with smiles as Luffy was enjoying the food they made, and Graphia decided to ask him a question. "Hey Luffy, how can you eat so much despite being human?" "If I eat more I can fight more," Luffy responded. "So calories help you fight?" she asked again. "Kalo wa?" Luffy looked at her a bit confused. "Never mind," she said with a sweat. Graphia looked at Luffy and wondered how she fell in love with such an idiot, but then after looking at him again eating with a bright smile and enjoying life, she smiled and suddenly knew why. After some time they decided to head to bed and they all went to their respective rooms, and that's what Luffy thought anyways. A few hours later Luffy was dead asleep, and that's when the girls decided to strike. The first to leave their room was Akainu, who sneakily crept to Luffy's room with the intent to have fun with him. But as she got to the door, Rias was about to creep in also with the intent of making love with Luffy, but stopped when she saw Akainu appear. "Akainu, what are you doing here?" Rias asked her queen. "I could ask you the same question, Buchu," Akainu responded. "I was just here to check if Luffy's sleeping well." "Yes, that's it," Rias said, a little nervous. "Oh really?" Akainu said in a teasing tone. Yeah, so why are you here, Akainu?" Rias asked her. "Oh, I'm here to make love to my dear Luffy-kun," she said without the intent of hiding her motives. "Huh?" Rias said as she looked at her with a blush. "Are my ears deceiving me?" Tiamat said with her arms crossed as she walked closer to them. It seems it'll take a while before I can see my dear Luffy-kun," Akainu said with her hand on her cheek. "The only person who can make love to Luffy-sama is me, got it?" Tiamat said as she advertised her mommy milkers. "Don't be delusional," Rainier said as she walked over to them. "Oh great, another one," Rias said as she rolled her eyes. "Listen here, the only person who will make love to Luffy-sama is me." Rainier said as she flashed her hair and her boobas bouncing up and down. In your dreams, Rias retorted. What did you say? Rainier said a little pissed. Would you keep it down, you'll wake him up, Tiamat lectured. I mean, he's my fiancé, it only makes sense if I get to make love with him, said Rias. That's the biggest piece of crap I've ever heard, Rainier chimed. Hey, I got an idea, Akano finally spoke, and what may that be? Tiamat looked at her. How about we ask Luffy who he wants to sleep with first, Akano spoke. What makes you think that'll work? Asked Rias. I mean, Luffy-sama is a pretty straightforward guy, Rainier said. I see, so if we ask him directly he may give us the answer, said Tiamat. Alright then, let's go ask him, Rias said with a confident smile. The girls turned to look at the door and took deep breaths as they opened the door. When they walked in they were shocked to see Asia and Kaneko sleeping on each side of Luffy's arms and he was spread out like a child. What the? They said in unison that miraculously managed to wake Luffy up, and he stared at them before asking, what are guys standing there for? He said with a yawn. The girls looked at him with faces mixed with surprise and frustration before Rias asked the question that was bothering them all. Luffy, why is Asia and Kaneko sleeping with you? Luffy looked at her with a confused face and answered her. Well, that's because they asked, he said with a confused face. The girls were shocked by this answer because all they had to do was ask and they could sleep beside him anytime they want. They all looked at each other and gave nods before asking in unison. Luffy, can we sleep with you too? They asked. Sure, Luffy said with a smile, and all the girls ran to the most comfortable part of Luffy's body. They all got in a comfortable position and after a while they fell asleep. While they were asleep, a M started to open in the middle of Luffy's room. It had only been an hour since Luffy disappeared and everyone thought that he was still fighting Kaido, the captain of the Beast Pirates. Nami, Usopp and Tama were running away from one of the four emperors known as Big Mom. As they were running away they coincidentally ran into the performance hall where Sanji was about to fight Queen. Oh great, another enemy, groaned Sanji as he saw the huge figure of Big Mom heading his way. Sanji, shouted Nami as she was holding Tama in her hands. Nami, what are you doing here? Sanji asked as he kept avoiding Queen's attacks. We have to get Tama to a safe place first, Nami shouted. Tama, what is she doing here? Sanji shouted. That doesn't matter, the problem is that, screamed Nami as she pointed at Big Mom who was close behind them. Big Mom was now entering the hall holding her sword in her hand and riding on her new female cloud. Sanji was now in a dilemma as he had to deal with Big Mom but also had Queen to deal with. Of all times, why does that green-haired idiot have to be injured now? Sanji shouted. Nami heard what he said and looked around. To her surprise she saw Zoro heavily bandaged and Chopper with two other minks taking care of him. She quickly got off Horselina and ran over to Zoro to see if he was alright. When she got there she saw Chopper, who looked very weird. Chopper, what happened to you? She asked. Don't worry about me, I should be fine. He's the one who needs help, Chopper said as he looked at Zoro, who was sleeping. As they were trying to take care of Zoro, Sanji was suddenly sent flying towards them, knocking him Nami Zoro a little far from Chopper and the minks. Hey, watch where you land, Zoro groaned and went back to sleep. Shut up before I kick you, Moss head, Sanji snapped back, but then Nami hit him in the head. Now's not the time, you idiot, Nami screamed at him. Sanji looked at her and apologized. My mistake, Nami, he said with a little bow. Nami just rolled her eyes and looked at Horselina, who was carrying Tama and Usopp. Hey, get them to a safe place far from here, okay? She yelled and Horselina nodded and ran out of there, and Nami was now a bit relieved. Now back to the fight. Big Mom and Queen were having an argument on who would get to kill them. As they were fighting amongst themselves, Nami saw an opportunity to get out of there. And as she was about to sneak out she was caught by Big Mom, who then smiled. Where do you think you're going? Big Mom said with a menacing smile. Nami looked at her with fear and quickly ran back to Sanji and the sleeping Zoro, who she accidentally knocked, causing his bandages to untangle, revealing his scared body. Big Mom had an even bigger smile and started charging her sword and looked at the sleeping Zoro. Hey, you're the swordsman that deflected my and Kaido's attack earlier, right? She said, and everyone looked a bit confused. Let's see if you can deflect this one, she said as she threw a big slash heading straight for Zoro, Nami and Sanji. Before the slash was about to hit them, Sanji grabbed both Nami and Zoro and quickly jumped into the air, barely dodging the attack and landing very close to where the attack hit. When the attack hit the ground, it caused a huge explosion, and suddenly a huge lightning burst hit the ground and a weird red circle appeared right where Sanji landed, and Big Mom's leg was touching it a bit, but she didn't notice. Sanji, Nami, Zoro, Chopper tried to scream, but his condition wouldn't let him. Sanji was confused on what the hell just happened, and the circle started blowing a bright light. "Hey, what the hell is that?" Queen shouted in frustration. Big Mom just looked confused and was covering her eyes as the light got brighter and brighter. Nami was getting scared as she thought that this was going to kill her, and she had comical tears flowing down. That's when another bolt of lightning hit, and the asterisk swoosh, they were gone. "What the hell?" Queen eyes popped out of his glasses, and Chopper was in shock because his friends suddenly disappeared. All the soldiers who saw the incident were also shocked because their only hope suddenly disappeared. DXD Universe Asia woke up because she wanted to go to the bathroom, but when she got off the bed full of women, she saw the mysterious portal and was a little freaked out by it, so she decided to wake up Rias to see if she knew anything about it. When Rias got up to see what it was, the rest of the girls woke up and joined in trying to figure out what the portal was. "Should we wake up Luffy-sama and see if he knows?" Rainier asked. "No, just let him sleep, we'll wake him up if something bad happens," Rias replied. "Alright, so any idea of what it is?" asked Akeno. "No clue," said Kaneko. As they were investigating, the portal suddenly started glowing a bright light, blinding the girls in the process. When the light finally died down, the girls saw 3 people lying where the portal was. "Who are they?" Asia asked. The girls put their guard up just in case and looked at the 3 bodies on the floor and noticed that they were injured, and one of them had bad scars all over his body. After a while, 2 of them started to get up and looked at the girls, who looked back at them confused. "Who are you?" the girl asked the girls, but they just looked at her even more confused. On the other hand, the man had hearts in his eyes and his brain was having all kinds of thought before he fainted from a nosebleed. The girl looked at him and face-palmed before she got up on her legs in a dizzy sort of motion because of her injuries and looked at the girls. Excuse me, but can you tell me where we are?" the girl asked them. The girls looked at each other before looking back at the orange-haired girl and back again at each other. The orange-haired girl looked at them before her eyes darted at the person sleeping on the bed, and she thought he looked familiar before her injuries got the best of her and she passed out. The girls were surprised to see the girl suddenly pass out, and in a panic they quickly grabbed futons and laid them on the floor near Luffy's bed and started healing them. After an hour of healing, the girls were tired and went back to sleep with Luffy on his bed. Somewhere in Gregory Kokebiel was sitting with Valley discussing some business when suddenly they heard an explosion coming from outside. They were both surprised by the sound and quickly jumped to see what it was. When they got there, they were shocked to see a big woman who seemed to be at least 5 feet taller than them laying unconscious in a crater. "What the hell is that?" the white-haired boy asked. "I don't know, but it's very interesting," said Kokebiel with a grin. The boy looked at Kokebiel and wondered what he was thinking before he looked back at the big woman. "In the morning we see everyone sleeping, and then the mysterious girl with orange hair began to wake up and stared at the roof before remembering what happened and bolted up and looked side to side. She saw Zoro and Sanji sleeping next to her in separate futons and was shocked to see them healed and even more shocked to see herself healed. A few seconds later, Zoro began to wake up and saw Nami, who was staring at her in confused face. He then groaned and stretched a bit, causing one of his swords to hit Sanji in the face, causing him to wake up. Sanji also got and looked at Zoro with angry look, and right as he was about to speak, he remembered that he saw a bunch of girls last night and thought to himself if they were real or not. After stretching a bit, Zoro looked at his wounds, which were gone, and then looked at the roof. I need some booze," Zoro said in a tired tone. "You wake up in a mysterious place and the first thing you think of is booze?" Nami shouted and hit his head. "OWW." Zoro groaned and looked at Nami, then at Sanji. "Oh, Curly Brow is here too," Zoro said, knocking Sanji out of his perverted thoughts. "What did you say, Moss Head?" Sanji screamed at Zoro. "Would you two shut up?" Nami shouted as she hit both of them. "We gotta figure out where we are and how we're healed," Nami said to the both of them. That's when they heard a cute groan coming from the bed next to them. They all looked at the bed in curiosity, and then they saw a girl with crimson red hair, green eyes, big mommy milkers that could rival Zoro's, and a beautiful figure get up from the bed and then looked at them. Nami just looked at her in awe, and Sanji had a nosebleed with hearts in his eyes, while Zoro just looked at Sanji with a bored expression. The girl stared at them for a while before realizing that she was naked and elegantly put on the nightgown that was on the dressing table near her and looking at them again. "It seems you guys woke up," she said with a smile. They looked at her again with both confused and surprised faces before 5 more girls got up from the bed and saw the red hair looking at the people they found. They went over to where the redhead was sitting and looked at the strange people with smiles. The mysterious man with curly brows got an even bigger nosebleed before he got hit in the head by the girl with orange hair, and a slight chuckle from the man with green hair. "So who are you guys?" asked the redhead. The orange-haired girl got her composure and looked at them for a good 10 seconds before speaking. "Don't you think it's rude to ask who someone is with introducing yourself first?" she said with an interrogating look. Zoro looked at the women and got up from the futon he was sitting on and looked around. When his eyes landed on the man sleeping on the bed, he got a shocked look on his face, alerting Nami and Sanji, who then both got up from the bed to see what he was looking at. When they saw who's sleeping on the bed, they also had shocked expression on their faces, which made the girls curious. "Luffy," they all said in surprise, which shocked the girls because the mysterious people knew their boyfriend. They looked at the mysterious people, then looked at Luffy, who was now slowly waking up. Luffy got up from his bed and looked around the room, and when his eyes landed on the mysterious people, he got a big smile on his face, stood up from the bed. "Zoro, Nami, Sanji," Luffy shouted with a big smile. The aforementioned changed their faces from shock to happiness as they saw Luffy jump at them for a hug. "You guys are okay, ha ha ha," Luffy laughed as he hugged them. "We're happy to see you too, Luffy," Sanji said in a calm voice. "I knew you wouldn't lose to Kaido," Zoro said with a smile. Nami kept quiet as she looked at Luffy with a questioning look and glanced at the girls who were watching them in confusion. After the hug was over, Luffy wanted to talk more but was interrupted by Nami, who wanted to know who the girls were, what connection they have with Luffy. "Hey Luffy, who are they?" Nami asked, pointing at the girls. "Yes, Luffy-sama, we would also like to know who the strange people are," Reiner spoke. "Sama?" asked Sanji in a pissed tone. "Did you just call him Luffy-sama?" Nami asked, a little surprised. "Yes, is there a problem?" Reiner asked her with a stern look, giving Nami chills and Sanji a nosebleed. "Alright, let's no fight. We'll introduce ourselves first," Ria said as she walked over and stood next to Luffy. "I'll go first. I am Rias Gremory, heiress of the Gremory clan and Luffy's wife," she introduced. They all looked at her with surprise, including the girls, because of that last part of the introduction. Nami was shocked to hear this, and Sanji looked like his soul left his body, while Zoro only had a sweat on his head. The girls then got menacing smiles and walked over to also introduce themselves. "Hello, I am Akano Himejima and I am also Luffy's wife," she said, also surprising everyone. "I'm Asia Argentino and Luffy-san's third wife," she said with a mega blush on her face as she tried to hide it with her hands, causing Sanji to start crying. "I am Kaneko Tojo and Luffy-senpai's fourth wife," she said with little blush. "I'm Reiner, Luffy-sama's fifth wife," she said with a cocky smile as she started at Nami, then at Sanji. "I'm Tiamat, Luffy-sama's sixth wife," she said as she put her breasts on Luffy's head. That was when Sanji hit his breaking point. We walked over to Luffy with an angry look and then kicked him in the head. "You bastard! First you had an island loaded with hot women, then you had the pirate empress propose to you, and now you 6 beautiful, SXY, cute and loyal wives. Leave some for the rest of us," Sanji shouted in tears, causing everyone to have a sweat on their head at the scene. Nami then cleared her throat and forcefully pulling Sanji away from Luffy, who was being suffocated by Sanji. "Ahem, I'm Nami and I'm the navigator of our pirate crew," Nami said in a bit of a serious tone and then glared at Zoro to introduce himself. "I'm Zoro the swordsman," he said bluntly, "and I'm Sanji the cook of this fine crew, and there's anything you need, just name it, I'll have it done in an instant," he said with a bow. They all looked at him with a sweat and felt a little creeper out at how he acts, while Luffy was looking at the girls with a confused face. "What's wrong, Luffy-san?" Asia asked. Luffy looked at her while rubbing his chin. "I don't remember getting married to any of you," he said while scratching his head. They all looked at him again with a sweat and then just smiled at his stupidity. Luffy-kun, we meant it as in we are your future brides, Akeno giggled. Oh, that makes sense, he said with a smile. Sanji got mad again, but before he was about to hit Luffy, Tiamat stood in the way and Sanji stopped right before he hit her. I will not allow you to hurt Luffy-sama again, she said with a bit of venom in her voice. Sanji sighed and stood down even though he was still pissed and lit a cigarette, and Kaneko slapped it out of his hand. No smoking, she said with a stern look, and Sanji bowed down to apologize. Nami looked at him with a sweat and began to ask some important questions. Hey Luffy, what island is this? Nami asked. I don't know, I was fighting Kaido and when I fell of the island I suddenly woke up here, Luffy said to her. So you don't know where we are? She asked again. Nope, but they do, Luffy said, pointing at the girls. Nami looked at them and saw that the one called Akeno has stepped forward. If I may speak, you guys are currently in the city of Kuo in Japan, which in other words is in a totally different reality from the one you know, she briefly said. Nami was shocked to hear this, while Sanji and Zoro were a bit confused at what she said until they saw Nami panicking. What is it, Nami? Asked Sanji. Nami looked at both of them with a stressed out look and screamed. You idiots, can't you see we're in a different world from ours? Zoro and Sanji were kinda shocked to hear this but quickly calmed down, and so did Nami. So is there any way to get back? Nami asked. Oh yeah, there is. Akeno can do this soup that can send us back to our world, Luffy said in a cheerful tone, and Akeno continued what he was saying. Yes, but I need some time to gather the necessary amount of magic power to send you all back, she said. And how long could that take? Nami asked. Well, I'd say about 3 more weeks, then I should be done, she said again, causing Nami to almost faint. 3 weeks? Kaido is gonna already have conquered Wano by then, Nami shouted. No need to worry, time works differently here from what we've seen, Rias spoke. What do you mean? Nami asked. How long has it been since Luffy fell of that island you guys speak of? Rias asked. About an hour, Nami said to her. Rias smiled, then said something that shocked all of them. Well, Luffy's been here for almost a month now, Rias said. A month? They all shouted in shock. So you don't need to worry about time at the moment, Rias said with a proud smile. As everyone settled down and began to relax, Luffy and Zoro's stomachs began to growl. Man, I'm hungry, Luffy said while rubbing his stomach. Yeah, you got something to eat? Zoro asked Luffy. Don't worry, we'll prepare your food in a moment, Akeno said with a smile. I'll help, Sanji said with his hands in his pockets. That'll be greatly appreciated, Asia said with a bow. Anything for you, Madam Morsel, Sanji said with a bow. All you two think about is food, Nami said as she put her hand on her head. With that, the crew followed the girls downstairs. Nat waited for the food to be made. Now everyone was sitting in the living room and were waiting for the food to be prepared by Akeno, Asia and Sanji. As they were sitting, Nami used this opportunity to ask some questions about where they are and for them to give her a proper explanation on who or what exactly they are. So where are we exactly? Nami asked with a stern face. You are in the city of Kuo in Japan, replied Rias, who was comfortably sitting next to Luffy, who was a bit uncomfortable at how many girls were flocking him. Which part of the Grand Line is that exactly? Nami asked again, this time confused. It's not in the place you call the Grand Line, Rias answered her again. What's that supposed to mean? Nami asked, now more concerned than confused. Well, to put it in simple terms, you're not in the Grand Line anymore, Rias said, and that caught the attention of Zoro, who was resting next to the couch on the floor. What? Nami screamed. Well, to brief it up, you guys were somehow transported to our dimension using unknown magic, Rias said as she also wondered about that phenomenon. Nami was in disbelief at what she just heard because she thought they were just pulling her leg at first, and she sat on the couch and started panicking a little. Luffy saw this and didn't like seeing his friend panic like that, so to cheer her up he said something that made her calm down a bit. Don't worry, Nami, in 3 weeks Akeno's gonna do the trick that can send us home, Luffy said in an attempt to cheer her up, which seemed to work as she gained her composure. Once she was fine again, she sat up and began to ask more questions, but this time they were about what they were. Sigh. Okay, I'll relax about where we are, but I have a few questions about you guys, Nami asked as she looked at everyone sitting around Luffy. Okay, ask ahead, said Rias. Okay, since we're in another world, I don't suppose any of you possess devil fruit abilities or even know what they are, said Nami in a casual tone. That's correct, replied Rias with a smile. Nami narrowed her eyes at that remark. If you guys don't have devil fruits, then how can you do magic and all that stuff? Nami asked. Rias smiled at that question before answering. Why, that's a simple answer, answered Rias as she stood up from her seat, and so did everyone else, prompting Zoro to look at them. Which is? Asked Nami. We're devils, Rias said as her bat-like wings appeared from her back, and so did everyone else's. Nami only stood there with a face of shock as she stared at the people in front of her who claimed to be literal devils. Zoro, on the other hand, was not so shocked. Instead, he stood up from his seat and sat next to Nami so he can fully hear what's going on, and Nami spoke in a bit of a shaky voice. So you guys are actual devils, she said with many thought in her head. Don't worry Nami, they won't hurt you, right guys? Luffy said with a smile as he sat next to Zoro because he had enough of the girls flocking him. If you say so, Nami said in a depressed voice, and a tear came down. So how did you guys end up being the wives of our captain over here? Said Zoro, referring to Luffy. Well, before she could finish, Kano walked in the room announcing that the food was ready, much to Zoro and Luffy's delight. A few minutes later, everyone was now eating their respective meals, and as usual Luffy was munching his 7th place of food while Zoro was having some sake which Rias provided for him, and after some time Kiba and Naruto arrived at Luffy's place as Rias called for them to come. While they were eating, Nami took of the armor she was wearing and a folded paper came out, and Rainier picked it up from the floor and unfolded it. What is this? She asked as she saw a poster of Nami with dead or alive on it and a numbers. Nami looked at what Rainier was holding, and with a smile she told them that it was her wanted poster, and the number was how much someone would get paid if they took her to the Marines, dead or alive. That surprised all of them as they didn't expect someone like her to be wanted for such a high amount, and that's when Nami spoke again. If you think mine is high, you should see these 3, she said as she looked through her hidden bag and took out 3 more folded papers. Nami unfolded the papers and put them on the table, including hers, for everyone to see, and they were baffled by what they were seeing. Wanted monkey. D. Luffy bounty. 1,500,000,000 wanted. RORANOA Zoro bounty. 322 million wanted. VINSMOKE Sanji bounty. 330 million wanted. CATBURGLER Nami bounty. 66 million. They looked through the wanted posters and were shocked to see exactly how much Luffy was wanted for. The girls were the most shocked because in their eyes Luffy was a kind and carefree person, and they just couldn't imagine just what he had done to have a bounty that high, and he's only 19. On the other hand, Sanji had a smug grin on his face as he looked at Zoro. Hey look, Moss had my bounties higher than yours, said Sanji, which pissed off Zoro. Shut up, curly brows, we both know that your bounty's higher because I wasn't there to cause some havoc in whole cake, shouted Zoro, which shocked everyone in the room except Luffy and Nami. Wait, you guys actually want your bounties to go higher? Naruto asked. Of course, Luffy answered with a smile. Why? Asked Kano. Your bounty represents your standing in the pirate world, and if I want to become the king of the pirates, mine has to be the highest, and in order to do that I gotta kick Kaido's and Big Mom's asses, Luffy said with a determined voice. The girls looked at him and could only smile at their boyfriend's bright personality, but then Rias asked a question that she's been meaning to ask for a while now. Hey Luffy, called Rias. Yeah? Luffy looked at her. You keep mentioning this Kaido guy. Who is he exactly? The Straw Hat crew kept silent at Rias's question, which made her kind of nervous, but as she was about to say it's okay if they don't want to talk about it, Nami spoke. We can tell you who he is, but can we tell you after I get a shower? Nami said as she smelled like sweat. Rias was a bit relieved by that and directed Nami to where the shower is. A few minutes had passed, and after what felt like centuries, Nami finally walked out of the shower and walked over to where everyone was sitting, and when they saw her, she was wearing a mini shirt and some jeans that were landed to her by Rias. Thanks for lending me the clothes, by the way, Nami said as she sat in between Zoro and Luffy, who were now half asleep. No problem, Rias said with a smile. They're a bit tight though, Nami said as she tried to stretch it out a bit. That for some reason made Rias feel a bit insecure about her bust size, and also a bit mad at how Nami just sat next to Luffy like that spot was reserved for her, but in the end she just smiled at Nami and told her she'd give her a bigger size later. Nami then cleared her throat and Luffy, Zoro and Sanji got serious as they knew what she was about to talk about and that made everyone feel nervous. "Alright, are you guys prepared?" Nami asked them in a serious tone. "Yes," they all said in unison. "Alright, but this is a pretty dark tale so discretion is advised," Nami warned again. They all nodded in unison and prepared to hear the tale they were about to be told. Nami took in a deep breath and nodded at Luffy, Zoro and Sanji for assistance as she told the tale. Alright, Kaido, also known as the King of Beasts, is one of the 4 emperors of the sea, which are basically the strongest pirates in the world, and non-surprisingly Luffy just hit the requirements to become the 5th emperor, Nami explained as Luffy gave a prideful smile. The girls just gave smiles at Luffy and Naruto got a little pissed because Luffy had yet another title to show off. Anyways, the reason we are in such a big war in the first place is because 20 years ago, when Oden and his 9 retainers were on their way to Onigashima, Kaido and his crew confronted them in the Udon region. In the ensuing battle, Oden managed to inflict Kaido with a permanent wound on his torso, possibly the first he ever received. However, Kaido knocked Oden unconscious when Oden was distracted by Kurozumi Higurashi, who had impersonated a kidnapped Momonosuke sometime after the battle. Kaido killed Higurashi for her interference. On the day of Oden's execution, Kaido joined Orochi in witnessing the execution. Oden then made a deal with Kaido to let those who survived the execution go free and Kaido gave him an hour. Kaido was amused to watch Oden as the latter endured standing in a pot of boiling oil while holding his retainers above his head with a board. Although Oden successfully survived 1 hour in the boiling pot, Kaido and Orochi decided to execute Oden and his retainers regardless. As Oden's retainers fled, Kaido apologized to him for Higurashi's interference before shooting Oden in the head. After Oden's death, Kaido attacked and set Oden Castle ablaze before Oden's threatening Momonosuke. He told the boy that his father was a foolish lord. However, Kaido decided to leave Momonosuke in the burning castle instead of killing him outright. So Momonosuke's mother took the chance and sent him and 4 of his retainers 20 years into the future so they could find a way to defeat Kaido and open the gates of Wano. That's when they met our crew and evidently we decided to help them and that's why we're in a huge war. So I can kick Kaido's ass and set the land of Wano free, Luffy finished off. The others were just flabbergasted at how downright extreme things were in their world and after a few minutes of shock Akeno asked yet another question. So you're telling us that this Oden guy endured standing in a pot of burning oil while carrying 9 people? Akeno asked, still both shocked. Well, that's what Kind Mon told us, so yeah, I guess he did, Sanji answered. And right now you're telling us that Luffy here was in a decisive battle with him before he came here? Rias asked as she finally pulled herself together. Yeah, but it was kinda hard punching through his tough skin, Luffy said. Yeah, even I couldn't cut through him, said Zoro as he joined the conversation. Not to mention his huge too, so it's hard to get a clean hit on him, Sanji commented. And that dragon form of his is pretty terrifying, Nami added. The others just looked at them in disbelief as there were people in their world with such terrifying features. Are you guys sure this guy is human? Rainier asked. Yeah, pretty sure he is, said Nami. Can he also use the hockey power Luffy has? Asked Rias. Yeah, and it just makes beating him that much harder, said Zoro. After hearing that, they almost passed out of shock because if a person like that were to exist in their world they'd stand no chance of winning. But little did they know that someone already has appeared. Somewhere in Gregory Valley and Kokabe had finally managed to carry the oversized women who crashed into their yard into the middle of Kokabe's office. Damn, she heavier than I imagined, Valley complained. What did you expect? Just look at how huge she is, Kokabe said with a grin, but he had to admit that she weighed a ton even for him. But then as they were about to discuss what to do with her, she awoke and for some reason she looked pissed. Ah, so you awoke, Kokabe said as he tried to speak with her. But his efforts were shunned as the lady only stared at the ceiling with a mad expression. Kokabe was about to speak again, but the lady said something that surprised both him and Bali. Food, the lady said. Food? Valley asked with a confused face. She must be hungry, Kokabe said as he looked at her with an interested face. I mean, with her size it's not that surprising that she eats a lot, Valley said as he analyzed the lady. Tell the maids to cook up some food and a lot of it, Kokebile ordered Valley. Valley just gave a nod and went to tell the maids while Kokebile stayed to look after the oversized lady in the middle of the room. So do you have a name? Asked Kokebile. Huh? The oversized woman looked down and saw Kokebile standing in the next to her. You're not Eustace, kid? The lady said, which confused Kokebile, but he decided to ignore that and question her more. Yes, I'm not. My name is Kokebile, a pleasure to meet you, he said with a smile. Kokebile, huh? She confirmed in a non-caring voice. Precisely, Kokebile confirmed. You got any food? The lady asked. Ah yes, it should be here in a few minutes, Kokebile assured her, which gave him a surprise when she smiled excitedly for the food. I can't wait, the lady said with drool in her mouth. While we wait, do you mind telling me what your name is? Kokebile asked. Just call me Linlin, she said with a smile. Alright then, Linlin-san, Kokebile said with a smile. And as if they planned it, a bunch of maids walked with a bunch of food in tow, and the oversized lady smiled like child getting a new toy. Here is the food as promised, Kokebile said as he showcased the food that just arrived. The lady didn't waste any time and started inhaling all the food that was being served. She's a beast, Valley commented as he walked in the room with a knowing smile. Yeah, I feel like this one will be very useful in my research, Kokebile replied. We'll just have to wait and see, Valley said with a smile. Everyone had now calmed down from their shock and decided to get on with their day, because if they heard any more they would surely lose their minds. On the other hand, Naruto and Kiba, who were sitting outside Luffy's house, were busy discussing something, and Luffy decided to ask them what exactly they were talking about. Hey, what are you talking about? Luffy asked the two with a smile. Naruto jumped a bit because he didn't expect anyone to come at him. Oh, whoa dude, don't come at me like that, Naruto yelled as he walked down. Oh, sorry about that, Luffy said with a smile. Yeah, whatever man, said Naruto, trying to brush it off. What did you want, Luffy-san? Kiba asked. Oh, I saw you guys talking and I was bored, so I decided to join, Luffy said with a smile. Oh, we weren't talking about anything interesting, Naruto said with a nervous voice. Oh really? Luffy said, a little disappointed. Yeah, we were talking about schoolwork, Kiba chimed to make it more believable. Alright then, I'm gonna go see what Zoro is doing and join him, said Luffy as he walked away. That was close, said Naruto as he watched Luffy leave. Yeah, Kiba agreed. Now we agree on the plan, right? Asked Issei. Are you sure this is gonna work? Asked Kiba. It has two men. Trust me dude, it's foolproof, Naruto said with confidence. Alright, said Kiba with a sweat. We'll beat him for sure this time, said Naruto with a determined look. Later we see Luffy walking through the hallways of his huge house looking for Zoro or Sanji. After some time of wondering, he found Zoro and Sanji competing for who can lift the most. Luffy thought it would be fun to join and to also test his strength, and so he went over to join them, and they gladly accepted the challenge. And so it began. As they were lifting the weights, the girls saw them competing and decided to be the judges, which was an absolute L for Sanji, who kept on getting distracted by the girls jiggling melons as they cheered for them, which got him a hit from Nami knocking him out. So this competition was mostly Zoro and Luffy going head to head and lifting weights compared to elephants, which made the girls doubt their humanity. Zoro and Luffy kept going on for a while, but unfortunately they had concluded as a draw because no one had shown any intention of backing down. After some time they were all sitting in the living room with the girls surrounded Luffy as they were waiting for Sanji to finish preparing the food. The girls were very attentive to Luffy as they were amazed at how much he can lift, and that for some reason didn't sit well with Nami. What is this feeling? Nami thought to herself. Nami looked at Luffy, who was now getting annoyed at the constant touching. She couldn't help but wish she could do it too. Wait, what am I even thinking about? Nami yelled at herself internally. Nami was getting bothered by these thoughts and ultimately decided to ask him about it when he's alone. As the night was approaching, everyone was getting prepared for the night, and Nami was just in her room reading a random book she found in a shelf. She got bored of reading and decided to just go get some fresh air and walked outside to get some. As she got outside, she got a proper view of just how big the house is, and as she was admiring the house, she saw a familiar face staring at the sunset with an almost unreadable expression. One that read, "See you tomorrow, son." It was an odd sight to behold, but she smiled as it was something he'd do back on the sunny. She eventually snapped out of her thoughts and decided to go and talk to him about something that's been bothering her lately. When she got inside his room, she stared at him for a moment as his gaze was still fixated over the city as the sun dipped beneath the horizon. Nami was amazed by the sight, but for some reason her legs didn't want to move closer to him. After a while of this, she gathered the courage and called for him as she walked closer. Luffy turned around and smiled to see his navigator and spoke. "Nami, come on and watch the sunset with me," Luffy said with a smile. As nervous as she was, she stood firm and stood next to Luffy, who was sitting on the bar, and as she was about to speak, Luffy beat her to the punch as he spoke first. "Look," he said with a calm voice as he points at the setting sun, as its light slowly dims. Nami had to admit that it was a beautiful sight to behold. It's nice to just sit and not worry about the next fight, she thought. Nami switches her sight to Luffy, whose gaze was set on the beautiful skyline in front of him, excited for the next day to come. As the sun finally set, Luffy finally looked at Nami, who was still staring at him deep in thought. "So what's up?" Luffy asked Nami, who immediately snapped out of her thoughts. "Oh, I just wanted to ask you something," she answered him, a little nervous. "Ask ahead," he said with a gentle smile. "What's your actual relationship with the girls?" Nami asked with a nervous voice. Luffy looked at Nami with a confused face, and Nami noticed, so she tried to rephrase her question. "As in, are you close with them?" she asked again. "Oh yeah? We're close just like everyone else, including you," he said with a smile. Nami wasn't satisfied with that answer, so she decided to ask the killer question which could end this. "I mean, do you like them back?" she asked, this time a little louder. "Of course I like them," he yapped, which made Nami's heart sink straight to the floor. "I also like you, Zoro, Sanji, and everyone in the crew," he proudly yapped again. Nami just felt disappointed by that. "I mean, it's Luffy." It was obvious he never understood what she meant. As frustrating as it was, it's better than heartbreak, so she decided to drop the topic for today and leave his room. Luffy watched her leave and kinda felt bad because he didn't give her what she wanted, but he decided to talk to Naruto about it tomorrow at school because he was getting tired and wanted to sleep. As Nami got outside the door, she was surprised to Rias standing outside the door with a knowing smile. "Oh, Rias." Nami jumped, surprised at her presence. "Nami, we need to talk," said Rias as she led Nami to her room. Rias pulled Nami to her room because she wanted to talk to her about something. But when they got to her room, Akaino and Tiamat were also there, sitting on the bed. Nami was confused on what was going on, but also really anxious if Rias heard what she was trying to ask Luffy earlier. "Rias, what is all this about?" asked Nami, confused of the situation. "Before we begin, I'm gonna clarify that there's nothing serious going on between Luffy and us," said Rias, which for some reason made Nami a bit relieved. "He's still the same rubber idiot me and the other girls fell in love with," she continued. Nami's face went from relieved to shock at the last bit of what Rias said to her. "Wait, what was that last bit?" Nami slightly panicked as she asked that. "We love him," Tiamat answered. "No, not that part, the other part where you said you love him," Rias spoke. Nami was baffled by what the girls were saying, but as she was about to deny it. "There's no need for you to deny it," Akaino said. "I mean, it's written all over your face. Might as well be an open book," she finished. Nami was really starting to panic as she heard that. "I don't care one bit for that idiot captain." She could feel tears running up to her eyes when she said that. "He's just a rubbery buffoon with no clue," she said with her tears threatening to burst. "He doesn't care about me that way or any of you. He's just an idiot who doesn't care about others' feelings." A bit of droplets splashed from Nami's eyes to the floor. "He doesn't see that I or any of you love him," she said as tears fell from her eyes. The three girls smiled at Nami, holding her tightly and soothing the top of her head as she steadily calms down. "There really is nothing wrong with loving him. It's denying the fact that you do that's the problem," said Tiamat. "We already know that Luffy doesn't see us in that light, but we're trying our best to get him to see us like that," said Rias, still holding Nami. "It's the reason we love him so much. He's the only man who actually looks into our eyes while speaking to us instead of looking at our bodies like meat sacks," Akaino spoke. "And he's the only person who didn't want me because of my power and let me have a say in whether I come with him or not to mention he's really strong," Tiamat chimed. Nami listened to what they were saying and remembered back when Luffy saved her and her island from Arlong and didn't ask for anything in return. And with a shaky and bitter voice she shyly admitted to it. "I love him," she said timidly. They all just smiled at her and were proud that she broke out of her shell and admitted to her emotions, but then suddenly the door opened and Asia, Rainier and Kaneko fell through it. The girls just looked at them with a sweat on their heads and just let this one slide because they were in the same situation. The next morning Nami walked downstairs too and saw that everyone was awake and waiting for Sanji to finish making breakfast. She sat down next to Luffy, who was arguing with Duso over Zoro's bad sense of direction, but she also noticed that everyone was wearing some kind of uniform. Nami got curious on what the uniform was for and asked Rias, "Hey Rias, what's that uniform for and how did you manage to get someone like Luffy to wear it?" Nami asked, a bit shocked to see Luffy wearing long pants instead of his typical shorts. The girls giggled at that remark and explained to her what it's for. "These are the uniforms for the school we attend," said Rias with a smile. Nami, Sanji and Zoro were all shocked by those words. "Wait, you're saying that Luffy is attending school?" Sanji asked in shock. "Yes," giggled Rias. "How the hell did you manage to get him to do that?" Zoro asked, also in shock. "It didn't take much convincing," Akaino said with a smile. "That rubber-brained idiot is actually attending an education institution," Nami said in shock. "Hey, you can't call me an idiot anymore," Luffy said in a grumpy tone. The girls just looked at this with nervous smiles and Rias again threw another bombshell at the pirates. "Speaking of which, I've assigned you three to be teachers to our school as well," Rias explained. That shocked everyone, even Luffy, as she did that in over one night of them being there. "Hey, I'm not gonna go teach a bunch of brats about math or whatever," said Zoro. Rias, hearing that, got a big smile and explained what they would be teaching. "No need to worry Zoro-kun, you'll be teaching Kino since Luffy told us you're a master swordsman. Nami-chan will be the geometry teacher since she's the navigator of your ship and therefore has geographic knowledge, and Sanji-kun will the home economics teacher since he's skilled in the kitchen," Rias finished. That got everyone off guard because not only did she get them into a school, but she assigned them the perfect jobs that align with their talents with observations alone. "Wow Rias, you're pretty good at observation," Nami praised. "Not too bad," Zoro said with grin. "I'll do what I can," Sanji said, now serving the food. "Rias, you're smarter than I thought," Luffy praised. Rias had a proud grin on her face for getting praises from them and began to eat her food because they would have to leave soon. After they finished eating, Nami went to go take a shower and change into the clothes Akaino had picked out for her. When she came back downstairs, she had on a formal type uniform with the skirt being really short. Much to Naruto's happiness, Zoro was forced to also wear something formal, so they gave him a suit similar to the one he was wearing in the Dress Rosa arc, and Sanji had on his usual get-up. Now that everyone was prepared, they all got out the door and started walking to school. Rias and the rest of the orc went ahead of Luffy and his crew because Sona had called them to discuss some occasion that was going to happen during the day, and they'd meet again before classes start. After bidding their farewells, Luffy and the crew began to walk to the school. As usual, Zoro and Sanji began arguing while Nami chatted with Luffy, and not even a second after they entered there were already murmurs from the students in all directions. "Whoa, are they new?" One guy spoke. "I heard we'd be getting new teachers today," another guy rose. "Yeah, you think that's them?" another guy joined. "Probably," one guy replied. "Dude, look at that hot babe with orange hair," a student guy pointed. "Damn, I hope she teaches me," one boy said with a pervy face. The boys murmured. "Hey look, I think those are the new teachers," one girl whispered. "Yeah, I heard they were coming in today," another replied. "Those two at the arguing at the back look scary though," a girl pointed at Zoro and Sanji. "Yeah," one shivered. "Hey look, that orange-haired one is super chummy with Luffy-kun," a girl pointed at Luffy and Nami chatting. "Do you think they know each other?" one girl asked. "It's possible they do considering how close they're," the other girl answered. "I wish I were that close to Luffy-kun too," another cried. Those were the whispers from the girls. Nami obviously noticed the students whispering about her and like a normal person got a bit uncomfortable but decided to ignore it for now. After walking a bit they got inside the school and found a spot near the stairs to wait for Rias and the others. And after about 20 minutes of waiting, Rias and the others appeared from the student council room. When Luffy saw them he gave a wide smile and called them over to where he and his crew were standing. "Hey Rias, over here," he called out to them. The orc saw Luffy calling out to them, so they walked over to them to tell them some news. "Hey guys," they all greeted. Luffy was happy to see them even though he saw them an hour ago, though he was curious on why they left. "So why did Sona want to see you?" Luffy asked. "It's Sona." Naruto corrected him. "But that's what I just said," Luffy said with a somewhat confused face. Naruto gave a sigh and just gave up because he knew Luffy long enough to know that he's bad at memorizing people's names. Rias giggled a bit but got to the point after a few seconds. "Listen up guys," said Rias, which got the attention of Zoro and Sanji, who were looking around the place. Once Rias was sure everyone's paying attention, she began to announce what was discussed in the student council's office. "Alright, today's going to a bit different from the usual day of school," Rias announced. The crew looked at Rias with stern faces as she explained what was going on. "As some of us know, not long ago this school was a girls-only school and recently turned co-ed," Rias continued. Now the crew had confused faces because they had absolutely no idea what Rias was talking about, but decided they'd ask her about it later and let her continue. "With that said, a news channel has decided to come to our school and have a few interviews with some of the students and teachers," Rias finished her announcement. The crew got a bit of an understanding of what she'd talking about, but then again were wondering how they could do any of that without any video transponder snails. "So do you guys have some different type video transponder snails to broadcast the interviews to other people?" Nami asked, curious to how things work around here. Rias smiled at that question. "No we don't," Rias answered, which confused Nami. "Then how do you broadcast your news?" Nami asked, now curious. "We have cameras," Akano answered. "Cameras?" the crew asked at the same time. The orc members were having a bit of trouble containing their laughter because to them this was basic knowledge. Cameras are devices that take videos and saves them in a memory stick, or in our case news cameras that sends waves to broadcast towers and sends signals to the lines and then to people's TVs in their homes. Kiba gave a brief explanation. Nami somewhat understood and Sanji got the gist of it, but Luffy and Zoro were completely confused about it. "So based on what you're saying, these camera things can broadcast live info directly to people's homes, and I'm guessing that TV thing is what they use to watch what's being broadcasted," Nami rephrased, which helped Luffy and Zoro understand a bit about it. Rias was surprised on Nami's precise analysis and gave a slight nod. "You can even watch it on your phone," Naruto butted, which got confused faces from the crew. "A phone?" they asked with confused faces. Naruto saw this and with cocky smile he explained to them what a phone is and its functions to the crew, who were amazed on what a small device can do. "So that phone thing works as both a camera and as mini TV?" Sanji spoke, amazed by such a device. "And it can also be used to communicate with other people from far distances?" Nami also spoke in astonishment. "And you can play games on it too?" said in amazement. Zoro didn't speak, but he was also amazed by the device. The orc members smiled at the crew's reaction and promised to tell them more about their world another time as classes were about to begin. Right before classes would begin, everyone went to their respective classes except Rias and the Straw Hat crew, as she had to take them to the class they'd be teaching in. After some time of Zoro taking wrong turns and navigating through the school, everyone was in their respective class and would meet at the field after the lunch break bell rang. Classes went on as usual, with Luffy falling asleep 5 minutes in and the other crew members doing better than expected at their jobs. After a few hours the bell rang signifying lunchtime, and as lunchtime arrived the news interviewers were already in the premise asking random people various questions. At the school field they were now sitting down talking about how their classes went. While they were talking, Nami and Zoro appeared to join them, as Nami had to go get Zoro from his classroom to keep him from getting lost. Now that everyone was there they all sat down and the orc members began telling them things about their world. While they were talking, the interviewer and the cameraman approached the group and asked to ask a few questions, which they gladly accepted. The interviewer gave a smile and started to ask them some questions about the school and their experience in the school, which they gladly answered. But little did they know that interview would bring them some serious trouble in the future. Somewhere in Gregory, Big Mom was in the dining room feasting on some snacks given to her by the maids Kokabeel had ordered to look after her. Kokabeel was sitting in the living room watching the news with a grin, as his secret plan would soon come into effect. While eating, Big Mom got a bit curious about the sounds coming from the living room where Kokabeel was sitting. So she stood up, which caused the ceiling to shatter and walked, breaking some walls as she walked through them. As she walked over to where the sounds were coming from, When she got to where the sounds were coming from, she saw Kokebile staring at a wide flat board with a red-haired girl on it with an evil grin. "Hey Coca, what is that thing?" Big Mom pointed with a curious face. Kokebile laughed a bit at the nickname she gave him and explained what it was. "This is what we call a TV." Kokebile explained, "It's basically a device that allows me to see what other people are doing or watch something that people have acted out," he explained. Big Mom was amazed at such a device and immediately sat down to see what Kokebile was watching. "Hey Coca, who is that girl?" Big Mom asked. "That there is Rias Gremory, heiress of the Gremory clan, and my target," he said with an evil smile. Big Mom only looked in confusion as she didn't know why he's targeting such a pretty girl, but then as she thought that the camera shifted to the person standing next to he, and Big Mom was shocked to see such a familiar face. "Huh?" Big Mom Kokebile looked at Big Mom a bit surprised. "SSS Straw Hat," she screamed now with an angry look as she stared at the TV with intense hatred, causing the whole house to shake. As she released a bit of Conker's hockey, the whole building was shaking as the giant lady threw a fit over some boy with a straw hat that appeared on the TV screen. As she was throwing a fit, she released some Conker's hockey and the maids began to faint with foam in their mouths, and Kokebile had a little trouble standing up. "Lin-Lin-san, please calm down," Kokebile shouted as he tried to get up. The lady looked at him with eyes filled with pure anger and hatred. "Take me to him," she said with a voice filled with malice and that made Kokebile shake a bit. "I will, but you're going to have to wait a week or two," he answered. The lady looked at him again, and this time with frustration. "2 weeks," she yelled. Kokebile got up from the floor and backed a bit from her. "You see, Lin-Lin-san, I'm also after one of those kids myself," Kokebile said with an evil smile. The lady looked at him with confusion as he spoke. "The red head over there," he said as he pointed at Rias, who was talking on the screen with Luffy and everyone else behind her. "Her brother is one of my enemies, and if I kill her I can get my long-awaited revenge," he said with a voice of malice. The lady was even more confused because she didn't get why she had to wait 2 weeks to go and pummel the straw hat wearing boy. Kokebile noticed her confusion and smiled. "Listen, Lin-Lin-san, since we now know that both our enemies are in one spot, we can attack them and kill them when they least expect it," he said, and the lady finally understood what she meant but still didn't understand why the wait to attack them was so long. She looked at him with a face of thought before asking him again. "But then why do I have to wait 2 weeks?" she asked, and he smiled again. "You see, I've already made a plan to eliminate them, and it's going to take some time to get the necessary tools and equipment to execute my plan," he explained to her, and she seemed to understand. "So why do you need tools to kill them when you can just pummel them yourself?" the lady asked him, and he looked at her with a thoughtful look before answering. "Well, they aren't just any normal girls, Lin-Lin-san. They're devils, and the only way I can make sure they're dead is with the tools I'm gathering to kill them," he explained. "Devils? Like devil fruit?" the lady asked. Kokebile looked at her with confusion with that last part of her statement, but he shrugged it off as he thought she was thinking of food again because most of the time she spent here was spent eating. "No, I mean they are actual devils and can't be killed by mere knives or guns. They can only be killed by magic-imbued weapons or light spears," he explained, and that got the lady's attention for some reason. "I myself am a fallen angel, and my kind is the current enemy of these devils," he continued. The lady looked at him with a face of confusion as she didn't know what a fallen angel was. "What's a fallen angel?" the lady asked, and that surprised Kokebile as everyone knew what fallen angels or even people who didn't know supernatural beings existed. "Hey Lin-Lin-san, what race do you come from exactly?" Kokebile asked as he was now doubting what the lady was, as she was rather way too huge to be even called human. The lady looked at him with a blank expression. "What kind of question is that? I'm human, obviously," the lady spoke with blank voice, and that shocked Kokebile. He looked at her with a shocked face and then quickly calmed himself down. "Oh, I see," he said with a nervous face, and the lady looked at him with a puzzled face but shrugged it off as she was getting tired and wanted a nap. "All right, Coca, you better keep your promise and take me to Straw Hat or else," she said menacingly before standing up and leaving. Kokebile only looked at her walk away with a nervous smile and a sweat on his head as he thought to himself, "I don't know where she came from, but clearly she's not normal," he thought as he sat down. "Not only is she a lot bigger than an average human, that power she released earlier, what was it? Something so powerful it brought me to my knees and knocked everyone out cold," he thought as he looked at the unconscious maids. "And that boy with the straw, who is he? And what could he have done to get her to be that mad?" No, a better question is, does he also possess that power she has too? Kokabeel was heavy in thought and decided to call it a night because all this thought was giving him a headache. He stood up and went to his room, leaving all the unconscious maids on the floor. Whoever they are, I'll find out and I'll get my hands on that power, he thought as he entered his room. In Kuo Academy, the bell for after school rang and it was time for everyone to go home. As everyone was leaving the school to go home, Luffy was with Zoro and they were going to a specific club room in the school where their friends would be waiting for them. When they finally arrived, they saw that everyone except Sanji was already there and they were the last to enter. "Geez, took you long enough?" Naruto spoke as he was bored of waiting for them. "Sorry, I was having trouble finding Zoro," Luffy said with a smile. Zoro, hearing that, would get annoyed. "Hey, I didn't get lost, it's just these hallways get confusing a little," he retorted. Everyone laughed at Zoro because they were kinda expecting this to happen, and Zoro got annoyed as he went to go sit in next to the couch on the floor and relax. Everyone looked at him with a sweat and nervous smile, but just decided to let him be and proceeded to go to their preferred seats, and Sanji came in with a bunch of food, much to Luffy's happiness. After everyone calmed down and took their seat, Rias stood up and got straight to business. "Alright guys, I called you here today to announce that tomorrow we'll be getting some visitors from the church," she announced. The crew was confused on why it was such a big deal, so Rias elaborated further on why this was such a big deal. "As some of you may know, churches are very harmful to us devils, and having church members come in our territory is dangerous, especially now since there's not many of us pure breeds left," she explained, which made the crew members understand a bit about the situation. "So tomorrow I want you guys to have your guards up and be careful, alright?" Rias asked everyone, to which they all nodded in agreement. "Alright, that's all for now," she clarified and sat back down. After her announcement, everyone decided to do their own thing until it was time to head home. After saying goodbye to Naruto and Kiba, they all went back home as they were going to have a tense day tomorrow. It was the beginning of a new day, and of course Luffy and Zoro were out cold on the sofa because they had spent all night watching TV, as they were fascinated by the many things they could watch, their favorite being about an alien man who could change his hair color when he screams. Rias and the others were already awake and preparing to go to school, and Sanji was preparing everyone's breakfast and lunchboxes with Kaneko sitting and watching. "Hey, don't you ever get tired preparing so many meals?" Kaneko asked as she watched him cook. "Nah, cooking for 9 people isn't much. Besides, I've cooked food for more than 50 people once," he said with a chuckle. That surprised Kaneko, and her respect for Sanji grew a bit. "That's quite a lot people, Sanji-kun," Akeno said as she walked down the stairs followed by Rias, Asia and Rainier. "You really cooked for that many people, Sanji-san?" Asia said, a bit stunned. "That is a lot of people," Rainier said, also stunned. "It's really not that big of a deal," Sanji said, now gushing a bit. "Oh, but it is," Akeno said, walking over to smell the food. "She's right, 50 people is a large number," Rainier spoke. "It's nice to have someone so reliable in the house," Akeno said with a smile. "Yeah?" Rainier agreed. "Please keep making more delicious dishes for us, Sanji-san," Asia said with a cute smile. "Why, of course, Asia Schwan," Sanji said with hearts in his eyes, and everyone got a sweat drop on their necks. As they were speaking, they suddenly hear loud thuds coming from the living room where Luffy and Zoro were sleeping. Smack asterisk smack. When they went to go look at what made the sound, they saw Luffy and Zoro on the ground with bumps on their heads, and Rias with smoke coming from her clenched fist. "What's the big idea, lady?" Zoro shouted. "Yeah, what was that for Rias?" Luffy said, rubbing his head. "Didn't I tell you two to stop watching TV and go to sleep last night?" Rias said with a vein on her forehead. "UHHM." Zoro and Luffy looked at each other while sweating a bit. "Now look, you left the TV on and you're both prepared for school." Rias pointed at the TV. "Sorry Rias, but the transforming guy was so cool we had to keep watching," Luffy said, which made everyone sweat drop. "Sigh, you know what, forget it, just go and get prepared for school," Rias said, and went to the kitchen. Zoro and Luffy went and got themselves prepared while everyone sat and waited for them. As they were waiting, Nami finally came down with her teacher's outfit that Rias got her. "You take a long time to get yourself prepared, huh, Nami-san?" Asia spoke. "A lady has to be perfect 100% of the time," Nami said as she sat down and Sanji served her breakfast. Not too long after, Luffy and Zoro scams down the stairs with Luffy in his uniform while wearing his classic straw hat and Zoro in his suit while carrying his 3 swords. Do you really need to take those everywhere you go? Tiamat asked while walking down the stairs in her bra and panties, which obviously gave Sanji a nosebleed. Never go anywhere without M. Zoro responded. Tiamat, please go put something on. Rias spoke. Why? Tiamat asked with a sly grin. Rias glared at her and spoke, because I asked you to and you're making everyone uncomfortable. Rias finished. Well, that sounds like your problem and only my master can tell me what to do, right, Luffy-sama? Tiamat said as she hugged him from behind and put her melons on his head, which made Sanji pissed off and Nami flinched a bit. Luffy wasn't paying attention and when he saw everyone looking at him he just answered, yeah. Luffy said, which made everyone's sweat drop as they knew he didn't know what they were talking about except for Tiamat, as she hugged even tighter and gave him a loving kiss on the cheek before heading back upstairs to hers and Luffy's room as she put it to put on some clothes. Nami gave a soft sigh before telling Luffy and Zoro to hurry up and eat so they can leave for school. Luffy and Zoro finally finished their food and everyone headed out to go to school, and on their way they saw Kiba and Naruto heading to school as well. Hey, Kiba, Naruto over here, Luffy called, and both Naruto and Kiba looked back to see Luffy and the others walking over to them. Hey guys, Naruto said as they got closer. Good morning, Rias said to both of them with a smile, and the other girls followed after. Let's walk to school together, Luffy said, to which they all agreed to and walked to school. When they got to school, almost immediately they heard the other students start fawning over them. Oh my god, look, it's Lady Rias and Lady Akeno. OMG, Kiba-senpai and Kaneko-chan are with them too. And she's walking with Luffy-senpai and the new teachers. Do they know each other? I don't know, but why is that pervert walking with them? Not him, of all people in this school. Naruto heard this and got a little depressed that the school only knows him for being a pervert, which was true in its own right, but it still hurt to hear. They continued walking until they got to hallway and began to part ways. Don't forget that we're going to have visitors later, so let's meet at the clubroom as soon as school ends, Rias said before leaving. Got it, they all said before heading to their respective classes. As usual, classes went smoothly, with Luffy being bombarded by girls every 5 minutes and surprisingly staying awake this time, but soon fell asleep in the second period. Sanji was now being called the stylish cook. With his amazing cooking skills, most of the girls admired him and receiving some hate from the boys because of the blatant favoritism he was showing by being extremely nice to the girls and normally to the boys. Zoro was known as the three-bladed demon because of his intense teachings. But that didn't stop most of the girls for admiring him, especially the Kino Club girls. Surprisingly, some guys admired him too because they thought of him as a Giga Chad and wanted to be like him. Nami was called the goddess of weather by the boys because of her amazing teaching skills about weather and beautiful looks, though she didn't receive any hate from the girls as she was equally nice to all students and scolded any boy who she caught looking at her wrong. After school, the school day finally came to and the squad began to assemble in the clubroom, with Luffy and Kiba being the only two who weren't there. I told him that he should be at any cost. Where is he? Rias said, a bit frustrated. And Kiba too, this really isn't like him, Rias said again. Relax, Rias. Luffy may be a complete idiot, but he's really reliable, so I'm sure he got caught up in something, Nami said to calm her down. Yeah, and I'm sure Kiba is making his way here right now, Naruto assured her. Sigh, I hope you're right, Rias said as she calmed down. After a few seconds of waiting, Zoro and Sanji suddenly perked their heads up, looking at the door, which alarmed everyone. What's wrong? Nami asked, a bit startled. There's 2 people coming, Sanji said as he let up his guard. And they have weapons. Unusual ones, Zoro said as he grabbed one of his swords and stared intently at the door. And right on cue, they heard a knock on the door and 2 people came in. The 2 individuals were wearing hooded clothing, but almost as soon as they entered they removed the hoods, revealing that they're both girls. One had dark blue hair with a green stripe and dark goldish eyes and carrying something wrapped in cloth. The other had light brown hair tied in pigtails and purple eyes. Good afternoon, Miss Rias Gremory, my name is Zenoivia, one of them spoke, and I'm Irina Shido, the other on said as she sat down on her seat, and Rias did the same by sitting on a sofa opposite of them. Okay then, what business do you have with me? Rias asked with a serious face. You see, initially the church owns 6 swords, 3 are accounted for, but the other 3 were stolen by fallen angels, Irina spoke. Well, that was unexpected, Nami said with a sigh. These are from the one we have left, Zenoivia said as she showed them what she was carrying. They're made from Excalibur, This one is mine. It's called the Sword of Destruction, surprised everyone and piqued Zoro's interest. And this one is mine. It's called the Holy Sword of Mimicry and it's an Excalibur as well, she said with enthusiasm, which also pulled the attention of Zoro, who was just listening. Okay, but that still doesn't explain why you visited us today. Rias spoke with interest. We're here to ask you to refrain from getting involved with the events that are to transpire between us and the fallen angels. Zenobia spoke in a serious tone. Rias gained an amused smile. Why? Are you scared we might side with the fallen angels? She asked. No, this is simply just unsettled business between the church and fallen angels, Zenobia finished. Rias smiled again at that. Well, you can rest assured that we won't interfere, as I won't allow my family's name to be involved, Rias said with her arms crossed. Zenobia smiled at that. That's good enough for me, she said as she stood up, and for a second her eyes landed on Zoro sitting on the floor with his eyes closed. Who is he? She wondered before her eyes landed on Asia, who was innocently standing next to Rainier when their eyes met. Aren't you Asia Argentino? Zenobia asked in a cold tone. Asia looked shocked as she looked at Zenobia. Oh my gosh, it is you. You're the former saint who became a witch, Irina said, which gave Asia a few flashbacks. Wow, I didn't believe you'd actually become a devil. Irina spoke again, and that made Asia tear up a bit. Whoa, Asia, you okay? Sanji asked. Of course she's not okay, she went from being a saint to being a devil, Zenobia said in a cold voice. Hey now, don't you think that's too far? Naruto spoke up. Relax, Sanji said as he patted his shoulder. Do you still believe in our god Asia? Zenobia asked. What are you saying? Of course she do. But she was cut off by Zenobia. No, there are still those who hold a glimpse of what they believed in before they change. And she might be one of them, Zenobia stated. Wow, really? Do you still believe in God Asia? Irina asked. Why yes, I've never been able to stop believing in God, Asia said as tears fell from her eyes. Then you should allow us to execute you this instant to prove your belief, and maybe this price will be enough to pay for the sins you've committed, Zenobia said as she turned to look at Asia. That's taking it a bit far now, Sanji intervened. If she can't sacrifice herself to repent for her sins, then she has no right to believe in God, Zenobia said as walked closer to Asia, who was now crying. But before they could blink, Zoro was now in between Asia and Zenobia, and with his sword unsheathed and pointing it at Zenobia. I didn't even see him move. They all thought as they looked at Zoro with surprised faces. Making her cry is one thing, but the threatening to kill the captain's wife is just something I can't pass, Zoro said with a small smile. Zenobia felt shivers run down her neck by what he just said, but then suddenly both Kiba and Luffy walked in the club, and Kiba got a serious face while Luffy was mildly serious as he saw Zoro pointing his sword at a random girl he didn't know. What's going on here? Luffy said, a bit serious.